Great, looks like people are trickling in here, so we'll give it just another minute, and then we'll get going. Well, as these last few are coming in here, I'll take the time to welcome everybody to the true cost of running a brewery. I am Jeremy King. I am one of the co-founders at Crafted ERP. So a little bit about my background. Really started my career in investment banking and really heavily into manufacturing and technology, which is kind of how I ended up here, I guess, eventually. But been a former, VP corporate development, COO, CFO. So I bring a lot of broad, knowledge of, different areas of operations to bear as I, apply all of these, to in terms of our work with breweries. All of this is kind of culminated in the founding of Crafted ERP. Crafted ERP is a full-blown ERP system designed specifically for craft breweries, wineries, distilleries, with the idea of automating as much as humanly possible and basically coming everything down to its most simplistic form. Really easy to use and really easy to get the value and the information that we need to out of the system in order to make the decisions that are going to allow us to maximize the value of our organizations. Again, we've little splurge of some of the customers that we have there, but focused very specifically, on this particular industry. And with that being said, the learning objectives for today really want to understand the cost drivers that are going to impact your profitability. There's three main things that we're going to go over today, really going into the cost of the beer, how that should be done, how you guys should be analyzing what those costs actually are. Then the cost of packaging. Are we going to sell this draft? Are we going to put it in cans, bottles, etc.? What are the things that we need to be looking at in order to understand what our costs are of not only the beer, but everything that's going into the packaging, so we know what we should be selling this for. And then finally, the cost of delivery. I mean, it's one thing to have kegs in your cold box. It's another thing to get those out into the marketplace, either in your tasting room or if you're actually packaging, getting that out through distribution or through direct to consumer, either through your tasting room, etc. But we're going to kind of go through those three main learning objectives, and then I'm going to open up the floor for questions. So I'm going to try to do this about a half and half, and the questions really are going to be a kind of an ask me anything type of approach. In order to submit a question, just submit it in the comment section. It should be in like the upper right hand corner of your screen there, but go ahead and supply that, or punch those in, and when we get to that latter half of the presentation, I'll go through and try to get those addressed. So with that saying, starting out with the cost of beer here, in its most simplistic form, and this is what a vast majority of what the customers were doing before they kind of came to us for additional assistance, is getting the cost of materials. So any of your hops, malts, yeast, etc. Any of those raw materials that you're actually bringing in, making sure that we're getting the actual good costs of all of those, as well as any of the other materials that are going into any of our packaged goods. So this is just a very simplistic model of, again, probably how I would say maybe 80% of breweries are currently doing this. So again, anything that's flowing in, it's flowing in through purchasing materials, our raw materials being consumed into our brewed liquid, and then being consumed into our packaged beer. This is great. It's going to give you a good idea of what's actually going on, in terms of costs, but it certainly is not showing the whole picture. And I would definitely warn, breweries that are doing this. There is a lot more that needs to be addressed when you're trying to come up into, taking other things into consideration when you're making actual business decisions. So again, this is the most basic model. It works well for what it does, but in terms of pricing, other things like that, there's a lot more we want to take into consideration. So when it comes to our intermediate look, I think it's pivotal that we're adding, any of the labor, overheads, etc., into this particular model, so that we can really understand, what these costs are for having to make the beer. So we're taking that same model that we just started with, that basic model, but now we're adding on things like labor. I mean, what are the costs for your brewers out there? Even if you're brewing it yourself, you should be assigning a cost to yourself so that you can get an idea of what that is going into the beer. Because if something happens, I mean, God forbid somebody catches COVID or something or has to quarantine and can't be there, you're going to have somebody else to be able to replace you. And so it's critical to understanding what are those production costs as it relates to labor, and making sure that those particular costs are being absorbed into the cost of the beer. And then you've got other things like overheads. When you look at your organizations, like our customers are typically going to have, in addition to labor, they're going to have any kind of facilities expense, so rent or mortgage on the facilities that you have. A certain portion of that should be allocated and set aside to production. And I even go so far as actually separating that to actual liquid production as well as packaging, because you're probably going to have different rates, different square footages, et cetera. But understanding what those costs are and making sure that we're collapsing and grabbing those costs and getting that allocated into the beer. You got utilities. You're going to have water expense. You're going to have electricity, gas. Again, some of these are going to be utilized by other areas. If you just look at the, you're going a brewery. You're going to have kind of production, and that's going to be broken down by packaging and liquid production. You're going to have some kind of administrative thing, probably a tasting room, and you want to make sure that these costs are broken out so you know what each area is actually costing you. But specifically, making sure the stuff that's associated with production getting allocated into the cost of the beer. So any of those utilities, and it's probably a vast majority of the utilities that breweries are utilizing, should be capitalized and captured in the cost of the product that they're producing. But in addition to that, the utilities, we're going to have insurance. We're going to have, another big one's depreciation on equipment. For some of you small breweries where everything that we're going to be selling is going to be within the United States, capturing that excise tax, upon packaging to make sure all of those costs get it. But it's all of these different overheads that we want to make sure are going into the brewed liquid, and then any of the packaging items as well, making sure that we're capturing all of those. So again, it goes above and beyond just the actual cost of the materials. We want to make sure that we're grabbing any of the labor it costs to run any of our packaging lines. And all of those same overheads that I explained earlier, the facilities, utilities, insurance, depreciation, et cetera, all flowing in that are specific to the packaging operations are, tagging on and adding into the additional cost of our finished package beer. And then we want to take things, I guess, one step further here, and making sure that we're getting other things that are related to this. So landed cost is a perfect example of this, where we might be bringing in, a silo's worth of grain, and that might be receiving at 29 to 35 cents, depending on what it is that we're per pound that we're bringing in. But this could be on a separate freight charge or something. There might be another $1,000 delivery fee that needs to be added into the cost of that. So we really want to be able to have a system that we can, even after the fact, being able to go in and apply these additional costs and have that costs flow then all the way down through this, costing model here to make sure it's included in that final cost of the packaged good when it's actually sold. So here I've just come up with a pretty simplistic model of the cost of draft beer. So we've got a couple key considerations here. We're just saying the cost of beer is 150 barrels, or $150 per barrel. We did a series earlier this year with the Craft Beer Professionals where we actually came up with all those numbers. So I'm building a little bit off what those did. So if you want to see where I came up with those numbers, certainly check out that. I think it was under the DTC 201 series in terms of where we detailed exactly how we came up all of that. So we're just going to say, for this flat particular model, our cost is going to be $150. We're going to have a labor rate assumption here of $25 an hour overhead. And certainly if you've got any questions on where I'm coming up with these numbers, I've got full detail behind these, and these are all really benchmark numbers that we've taken from a lot of our customer accounts and kind of sanitized. So I would say these are average numbers of what we would expect to see across at least our customer base. But we're taking an average overhead rate of $49 an hour, and again, that's going to be cumulative of that utilities, facilities, all those other things. I just rolled all that up into one number. Time to package is 1 minute in this case. So it's going to take, in order to package a half barrel of beer, 1 minute. So the time to take to package a full barrel is, 2 kegs is going to be 2 minutes here. And then I just laid out the what those numbers mean. So we've got our cost per unit and basically a very simplified bill of materials here, but coming up with a cost per keg and a cost per barrel, utilizing these assumptions here, as well as, you're saying a keg cap's 10 cents, a collar's 10 cents, our beer 75% or per keg, which is 150 per barrel. And that's going to get us to this 163.70. So this is taking that whole model of our cost of beer and taking that next step down and saying, okay, what is our cost of packaged beer? So all things being considered, we're saying cost of draft here, regardless of how it's sold, we'll get into that in a second, is going to be our 163.70. Now, if we move forward to our cost of the actual packaged beer, in this assumption, I'm using a 6.416. That seems to be one of the more popular ones out there today. So again, same cost of beer, same labor rates, same overhead rates. Here we're saying our cost to package is a half minute. So time to package a full barrel of beer is going to be between 5 and 7 minutes. So again, this is going to be dependent upon your, your canning line, et cetera. I think I use kind of an average for Cody in here to get an idea of what this would take. And then the same process in terms of how we're laying all of this stuff out. Over here on the right, again, the big fluctuations in cost here I want to make sure that we're calling out are the cost of the actual cans. In this case, we're using a 40-cent sleeved can. Again, if we go back to that, all of these numbers are coming from a detailed presentation we did for breaking down the cost of direct to consumer. And so if you want to see any and all of these, how we came up with any of these numbers, certainly check that out. I think that was 301 in our DTC things. But in this model, it's 40 cents a can, and we can see that range anywhere from 12 to 45 cents, depending on whether they're sleeved or not. Of course, if they're not sleeved, you got to look into cost of labels, et cetera. But here we're saying 15 cents per carrier, and that's going to be, what we're going to need for that. We're going to need 4 cents a can in, 35 cents a tray, et cetera. Beer should be the exact same price per barrel at 150, and then labor and overhead a little bit differently, same applied rates, but being applied specifically to a case here. And that's going to get us to a whopping $325.72. So significantly more expensive than putting this into draft. So as you're looking and kind of analyzing your brewery, you really have to look at your package splits. Because right off the bat, we can see it's going to be much more profitable to selling beer in draft format than it is package format. And of course, I'm trying to amplify that point here a little bit by showing, the cost of packaging materials can significantly sway your margins, and may very well significantly sway whether or not you want to actually get in, kind of to distribution or selling beer directly to consumers through, canned bottles, et cetera. So draft versus package. I'm just taking some of those same assumptions and I'm just laying this stuff out. Revenue per barrel, and again, we're assuming like $5 a pint versus I want to say we used $100 per case to come up with that over on the can side. So revenue per barrel right off the bat, you're going to be higher selling per draft. I know a lot of you guys out there are selling significantly more than $5 a draft, 6, 7, 8, depending on what the beer. Of course, that has got to be kind of in conjunction with the cost of the beer. And so assuming this is a $150 barrel beer. But we're going to see a $207 increase by selling draft versus cans. So we're doing better right off the bat when we take a look at that. Then our cost of goods sold per barrel, this is that 163 that we saw over on the keg side versus our 325. So not only are we picking up $207 in revenue, we're also trimming off $162 of cost by not having to have all the the labor overheads associated with the packaging, let alone all the actual packaging materials that go into it. So when it comes down to gross profit, we're at almost $370 more per barrel by doing draft versus cans. And gross margins then are significantly different as well. So 87%, that's probably pretty average from what we've seen across the board for our customers when it comes to what they're selling through their tasting rooms versus 68%. And this is, again, a direct-to-consumer model, not necessarily a distribution model. Because especially with the revenue per barrel that we're assuming here, I would anticipate to see that much less if we are looking at distribution. So just right there in terms of what we can control, just the format of the beer in which we're putting out there is going to have a significant impact on what it takes and what we're going to make in terms of what's going to drop to the bottom line. So by moving and shifting from draft to cans, we can expect to take just right there an 18% hit to our gross margins. And then the third one that we're going to look at, so we've talked about the cost of the beer, We've talked about the cost of our, getting it into some kind of package, keg versus can. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the cost of actually delivering that to the marketplace. So there's a lot more assumptions on this one here, but this is draft. So this is selling stuff through our tasting room. This is the stuff now that's going to flow if you're looking at a P&L statement. We talked a little bit about revenue. We've certainly talked about the cost of goods sold. Areas. Now we're going to talk about the stuff that's below that cost of goods sold line. So this is really your SG&A aspects of it. It's going to be, certainly all the people that are working in your tasting room, the labor, the rent, all of those other things that aren't necessarily attributed to the cost of the product per se, but are attributed to the cost of getting that product to the hands or into the hands of the consumers. So for our tap room assumptions here, we're going to assume that same cost of beer per keg or per barrel here of $163.70. Labor rate, now again, this is tasting room, so we've seen labor rates a little bit less in our tasting room than we do on the production floor. The reason for that is there's typically tips and some other types of compensation available to people. So what we're actually paying them, at least from what we've seen from the data, is less than what we're paying our production staff, who typically are not tipped out at the end of each shift. Then we're using an overhead rate here of $99 an hour. And again, if you guys want any breakdown behind where we're coming up with these numbers, I'm happy to share some of that detail. But this is going to be, we've got a significant facility. We've got the tasting room. We've got a large insurance piece because there's a lot of people work, or a lot of consumers and stuff in there. There's some depreciation, but this is usually broken out. All of these costs are broken out over a smaller period. Typically, we're running production more often than we're actually opening our tasting room, so the denominator here is smaller, which means our cost per hour is going to be a little bit higher than what we'd expect to see over on the production side. Then we make some assumptions here in terms of what it's going to take. So 3 minutes per pint is what we say, and that's not just to pour the pint. That's the the cost to go and collect the empty, the cost to wash it, and everything. So just taking a look at that spread across the board, that's what we think it's going to take in terms of labor for every pint that we actually serve. And then we think we can pour 2 pints per minute. So that's going to be just something that's going to be driving our revenue there. We're assuming that we're open 6 hours a day, which means we're doing 120 pints per hour there, which means 720 pints per day, which means 262,800 pints per year. So that's the equivalent about a little over 1,000 barrels. Well, I think that would probably be a typical sized tasting room from kind of what we've seen here. Now, in order to make all this operate, we're going to need about 7.5 FTEs. That's a full-time equivalent. So if you want to know the total hours, per year that we're going to have in labor, that would be 7.5, and we're going to multiply that by 2,080, which is the kind of the full-time hourly. Which means that we're going to, from a labor cost, be spending $263,000 just on labor. Again, that is not inclusive of tips, which are a pass-through. And then we're going to have $217,000 in just overall overhead. Now, that's going to include everything. Everything is not labor, effectively. And then on top of that, we're going to have some kind of POS system, which is going to inevitably be charging, fees for everything, credit card fees, et cetera. And so we just benchmark those at 3% of sales in terms of what they're taking out. So taking all of that stuff into consideration then, and that we've got our cost per beer, we've got our draft labor then, and this is, again, to sell a pint. We think it's going to cost us about $1 per pint to sell. We've got our 66 cents per beer, and that's the actual cost of the product that's going into that, which is pretty incredible. And you think that we're selling that for $5 or $6 a piece. Our overhead then, 83 cents a pint. And then our transaction fees for processing that through the POS, at 15 cents. So leaving us a grand cost of $2.64 or $204.54 per barrel. So not a whole lot of additional cost. I mean, when you look at it, the base was 66 cents, and then we just added on effectively an additional $2 in order to serve it through our tasting room, inclusive of everything that we have. That's going to lead to pretty impressive margins. So looking at that same thing, but we're going to shift to packaged beer now. And here I'm going to, again, to the extreme. So I'm saying, not only is it going to be packaged beer, but it's going to be direct-to-consumer packaged beer that we're going to ship. So we're going to add in a lot of additional metrics into this with the idea of all of these things need to be analyzed. All of these things need to be taken into consideration when we're trying to make business decisions in terms of how we want to get our beer to market. Because all of these are flowing into the cost and affecting the bottom line. And you really need to be able to analyze and understand exactly what all of these costs are. So diving into this one. We're going to make some assumptions here. So we've got an average order size of a half case. So that's three, I guess that would be 6 412s. We've got a cost of beer, coming in from the other one, $295.98. Similar labor rate, and again, we're going to need, if we're going to be satisfying this kind of business model, we're going to need to be pulling. It's most likely going to be tasting room staff before the tasting room opens to come in and help process these orders. So I'm going to assume it's going to be the same hourly rate, although these people aren't necessarily getting tipped on this work. Dramatically different overhead rate. Again, we don't anticipate we're going to need the whole tasting room. We're probably going to separate off a certain portion of that, and so we're not going to have the exact same overhead rate. And again, ask for more details. I'm happy to supply those, but our assumption here is a little under $40 an hour in terms of our overhead rates. Then we've got packaging material. If we're going to be sending beer outside our four walls, at the very least, we need some simple kind of packaging. And with beer, especially depending on your brewery, if you want to, have it with cold packs and everything else, we might be adding, and I'm assuming the additional is another $1.50. So that's $3 per order just for packaging materials. And those numbers could go up significantly depending on kind of the sophistication of some of the materials and other items that you're adding into that, to make sure that your beer arrives fresh. Now we've got a picking duration, assuming this is going to be three minutes per order. So people go around and grab the beer that they're looking to kind of stage it. Then they're going to take another 3 minutes to get that packaged and sealed up, and then inevitably we're going to have some kind of DTC or some other fee here because somebody probably bought this over the internet. Whether or not we're going, if somebody's going to be picking it up directly or we're actually shipping it out, we can do the math here to separate that stuff out. But inevitably there's going to be a fee for providing that service, and we've assumed just a flat 5% of sales. So moving over to the stuff on the right, we've got our cost per beer, which is $14.33 per order, which is a half case there. Packaging materials. You can see both the 150s for both of those. Again, those could vary significantly depending on whether or not we're actually shipping this out versus delivering this, in terms of a pickup order, or somebody's coming and just buying it directly through the tasting room. So that potentially could be eliminated when analyzing this. Picking labor, $1 per order. Overhead, almost $2 per order. Then we've got packing, same thing. Again, that's all based on those 3 minutes. Shipping costs, you can see that's fairly significant here. $12.50. Again, there was maybe we didn't show the assumption here, but it was a $25 is kind of per case. And again, this can fluctuate dramatically depending on the speed in which it's being shipped, as well as the distance in which it's being shipped. Here we assumed it was $25 a case. So we're going to see a $12.50 shipping cost to get this out the door, which of course can be eliminated if it's going to be a customer pickup. And then our transaction fee of $3.13. And that's generally going to be this. That can fluctuate a little bit if you're charging for shipping or not, because they're going to take, the processors are going to take a fee on top of that no matter what. So that gets us to $38.87 in order to satisfy a half beer going out the door, of actual packaged beer, and an $803 per barrel. Again, dramatically different than what we saw on this last one at the 204. So how we're selling our beer, how we're getting, these costs of delivery need to be understood because they can dramatically impact the bottom line. And it seems like, through everything that's adding more difficulty than selling out of your tasting room, not only is there additional complexity associated with that, but there's always additional costs. I mean, transaction fees go up, labor goes up, overhead goes up, all your packing and packaging materials go up. So with complexity definitely comes additional costs and reduced margins. And here's just an analysis of kind of margins per channel. So I'm taking some of these same things that we saw before, but I'm kind of rolling it out. And I added a third one here, pickup, just where I stripped out some of those shipping fees and some of the other things, so we can really get an idea of same beer sold throughout different distribution models, and how the decisions you make on what this mix is going to be are really going to impact the overall net margin, gross profitability of your business. So same beer, like I said, so our same across the board here, $5 per pint, $50 per order. Exactly what our revenue is on a per barrel basis. And then you can see, I mean, I think the big one here is going to be just the gross profits and how dramatically they fall off by moving to any of these others. And then what our net profit margins would be. So this first one is just the revenue side. Then we go down to the cost of goods sold. This is just for the beer and the packaging. And then the cost of sales is really that cost of delivery. But you can see that tap room is highly profitable. If we're getting into a DTC model where we're shipping beer, we're much less. So we got to be a lot more concerned about other things that are going to be impacting that. And then pickup, depending on the big thing here is depending on what you can sell that beer for. If you can sell your beer for close to the same cost per price per barrel that you can through your tasting room, and you're going to have a little additional, in some cases I've seen it for actually more, but you've got a little ability to play with the price point there, and consumers will pay a bit of a premium, we've seen, in order to take that beer and consume it at home. So you might be selling it at $5 per pint in your tasting room, but you might be able to get $6 per 16-ounce can if people have the ability to take that home. So it's something to consider, but there's going to be a balance because there will always be a benchmark that people can go to, and if you're selling that same room or that same beer in your tasting room, I mean, that's going to be the benchmark from which people are going to kind of do that price comparison in their head. But you've got this ability to kind of manipulate that price a little bit, and depending if you're going really inexpensive on your packaging materials, so we're getting kind of a blank can with maybe a very simple label on it, keeping costs down, you can make the argument that you can sell beer through pickup, so direct to consumer, but through your own tasting room here at about the same, if not greater than, again, that's all has to do with the price, but what you're selling draft through your tasting room. And with that, I finished 2 minutes ahead of time. I want to open this up to kind of the Ask Me Anything section of the presentation here. And so if you guys do have any questions on anything we covered today or anything else, certainly feel free to go and add them to the comments section here. And I can see Andrew has dropped in looks like a link to the 201 or 301 session that we did. So go ahead and add any comments in there, and if not, we can wrap this up a little bit early. All right. Well, if any of you do have any follow-up questions, please feel free to email me directly. My email address is jeremy@craftederp.com. I love sharing my knowledge and information with you, with the benefit of working with 50+ breweries in my time. Really think I understand, the model, what people should be analyzing, and try to share this information, with the marketplace, really as an education, and of course, taking that passion for all of this and building this into a system that can do a lot of this for us and give us visibility into all these numbers. But I'm happy to address any numbers or share or address any questions or share anything else that you guys need. So look forward to you guys reaching out.